Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 119 of the Navseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in Vomitorium South, otherwise known as the Bunker, with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. How you feeling, Dave?
I'm doing real well, Jeff.
Yeah?
I'm quite excited about this episode. And you know, I don't use the E word very often.
That's very true. Okay.
Excitement.
Right.
Spring is in the air here in Michigan.
Finally,
some really nice weather. And we're going to launch into the first part of Book 12 of the Aeneid.
Right.
It has been an epic journey, am I right?
It has, and we're nearing the end.
We are.
So, I mean, it looks like we'll have just a couple more episodes, including this one,
Yes.
On the Aeneid before we finally wrap this up.
That's right.
It's been kind of a years-long, almost literally a years-long journey.
Right. Now, we have interrupted it or punctuated it with some variety here and there. I learned a new word this week.
What's that?
A listener wrote in and said that the Tarzan episodes were a little off-piste, P-I-S-T-E, or I think I'm pronouncing that right.
What does that mean?
It means not on the normal ski slope.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who knew?
Okay, what hill were we on?
I don't know. The bunny hill?
Yeah. I mean, I think
suicide slalom?
I think that's probably correct.
Right.
It was kind of off the beaten path.
Yeah, but we're niche.
It's true.
That's right.
It's true, exactly. So,
and without apology.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
I think it was you who said last week, there's no one who's doing a podcast episode on Tarzan and classical precedents.
It has to be kind of an example of one.
Sui generis, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling, Jeff?
I'm feeling really good. Before I swung by and picked you up this afternoon, I was early as I usually am.
Yes.
So I stopped and I took a nice long walk under the bright sunshine.
Nice.
All the flowers and the trees are in bloom. It was great.
Are you participating? Are the Winkles participating in the No Mow May?
What is? I have no idea what that
seen
is.
this?
No, what's it? What is
I
it?
see the signs around in the yards and so forth.
No, N-O-M-O?
N-O-M-O-W. The No Mow.
Oh.
They're not mowing their yards in order to feed the bees.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Is there some kind of bee crisis going on?
I don't know, apparently. And not only does one have to do that, one has to tell all one's neighbors. My neighbor's not listening, but if he were.
So are you mowing? Are you?
I'm mowing.
Or you're anti-bee?
Oh, yes. Right. I just run the lawnmower around looking for bees.
Yeah.
No, the idea is you let the weeds grow up, and that helps feed the bees with their pollinating and so forth. And I'm sure it's a worthy cause, and I'm probably speaking from my typical ignorance here.
Yeah. You know, my wife is a huge gardener.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in your garden.
How large a garden does she like?
Well, it's as big as she can make it.
Okay.
She is. I mean, even this past week, she keeps digging up more of the green lawn, and is turning it into a garden, which is fine, which is less for me to mow.
Exactly.
Right. But I bought for her last year. I think for Mother's Day, one of those like bee houses.
Oh, yeah.
And you can nail it to a tree.
Yeah.
Not one bee
Yeah.
came by to move in. So I don't know.
Did you bake some cookies in it? They say that if you have some smell of fresh bread baking or something like that. Was it furnished? Apparently, if the place is furnished, it goes faster.
Well, it's one of the, have you seen these little houses got like these little kind of wooden tubes?
Okay.
Which apparently are very attractive to bees.
Apparently not.
And apparently not, no.
The bees came in, took one look around, and said, "We can do better."
Exactly. The rent is way too high.
Yeah.
So I might. I mean, I haven't mowed yet this May.
Yeah.
I might not mow.
You might not.
Yeah.
Well, the great thing is you can not mow and turn it into a virtue for not doing something.
That's right.
Which would be wonderful.
That's a draw for me.
Yeah. Speaking of virtues for not doing something, do we have a shout out this week?
We do not.
No, we don't.
So another week with no shout out. Right?
What do we put in there? What's in the script?
It says no grazie.
Yeah. Which is Italian, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
All right. So
does it irritate you when people say grazie?
I thought it was grazie.
It is grazie, but when you ever see it on like commercials or
I haven't seen
like
it.
when
you watching a lot of Prego commercials, a lot of ragu.
Well, like like a fast food restaurant will have introduce some kind of like Italian sandwich,
right?
And it's a grazie, right? But it's grazie.
Grazie.
Right, so.
Yeah. Oh well.
I find that just mildly annoying. I'm just sharing that.
Maybe we should devote a whole hour to the things that irritate us.
Isn't that what we do every week?
I think so. And an hour is probably not enough.
That's right. So what are we talking about today, Dave?
Book 12, Part 1, and this is the Duomachia. Right?
Duel Machia, yes.
This is where Turnus and Aeneas finally come to blows, and I think they decide to settle it in a fairly wise fashion.
They stand in for their respective sides.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
And I would like to, at some point during this episode, pontificate a little bit about political systems, because this raised some interesting questions in my mind.
Really?
Absolutely.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
All right.
But I think that you have the opening quote.
I do. This comes from an author who's got way too many abbreviated initials. For R-O-A-M, Rome, line.
Now, it had to be his parents' special joke, not just to give him 4 initials, but to make it an acronym, right?
Rome, exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah. So my sense is that scholars will often, add like extra initials because they want to distinguish themselves from somebody who has a similar name.
Yeah, that's compendiary padding.
Yeah, exactly. So it's another thing I find kind of a little mildly annoying, right?
That's 2 if you're keeping count at home.
How many other R lines were there out there? I don't know.
My favorite is when you abbreviate the first initial and then stress the middle name, right? Like J. Thomas Winkle.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds much more dignified than Jeff.
It does.
No offense.
No, like the rhythm to it, the cadence to it. Right?
J. Thomas Winkle.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
so what does line say? What's the title of the?
The title of the article is Lavinia's Blush, Vergil Aeneid 12, lines 64 to 70, and we've talked a bit about Lavinia in a much along the lines of how little Vergil has to say about Lavinia.
Correct.
Right? She's kind of this cipher, this silent character.
That's right.
Who doesn't get a lot of page time.
That's correct.
And so that's one of the reasons I chose this article, is because I thought this was an interesting way of kind of drawing her out.
Right. And now a listener who's a super fan, he sent me some communication with respect to the most recent Aeneid episode, in which he said that some novelist has written a full-length treatment of Lavinia. Now, I can't remember the novelist's name.
Is that right?
But he said this gap we've noticed has already been plugged.
Okay, all right. That seems to be kind of a thing right now.
Right.
Like with Madeline Miller's, Circe. You take the dangling thread and you weave a whole new tapestry out of it, which I think is it's
very appealing.
It's very appealing. It's a great idea, right?
But the market is fuller than we had thought. Remember, we were going to write that romance novel together.
Exactly right.
Cash in.
I think we still should.
Okay.
We still should, because whatever we came up would be way better than whatever this guy's talking about. Maybe.
So the source of this article is the journal Greece and Rome.
Yep.
Aptly named.
Yep. This goes back to 1983.
Yes.
And Mr. Line writes this. He says, in the Aeneid, actions are consistent with character and psychology. Indeed, indicative of character and psychology. This statement has, I think, general, if not universal truth. At any rate, one should not hastily assume otherwise.
Can we pause there a minute?
Yeah.
I think this is a worthwhile quote in terms of what's coming next. But I found this sentence so throwaway when I first read it, right? He makes this statement. It's a general, if not, in fact, a universal truth that in the Aeneid, character and psychology are consistent, right?
Yes.
Actions are consistent with character and psychology. But then he adds this caveat, at any rate, one should not hastily assume otherwise. It's very throwaway.
It is very throwaway.
You could apply that sentence to about anything, right? So I'm having this for lunch. At any rate, one should not hastily assume that I'm having something else.
Right.
It's really padding.
Right, exactly. Right.
But go on.
Gotcha. Right. So he writes, Amata begs Turnus not to fight Aeneas. So as we'll get into this, it starts with this this would-be duel.
Right.
We're going to settle this whole conflict by just having Aeneas and Turnus fight. And Amata, Turnus's mother, does not want him to do it. Lavinia is
not Turnus's mother.
Sorry,
mother-in-law. Prospective mother-in-law.
Exactly right. Begs Turnus not to fight Aeneas, and Lavinia is listening, and she weeps and she blushes. Would you mind reading a little Latin here?
Oh, I'd love to, especially this early in the episode. So this is Book 12, lines 64 and following. Ac pit vocem lacrimis Lavinia matris, flagrantis perfusa genas, qui plurimus ignem, subjecit ruboret calafacta per ora cucurdret, indum sanguineo velutivio lauret ostro. Sequus abur aut mixta rubent ubi lilia multa. Alba rosa talis virgo dabat ora colores, illum turbat amor. And that's where the line ends.
That's where the line ends.
Right.
Yes. Nicely done, as always.
Thank you.
And here's Lombardo's translations of those lines. Lavinia heard her mother's words, tears stinging her cheeks, and the blood ran to her face, like crimson dye staining Indian ivory, or the blush of white lilies mingled with roses. Turnus stared at the girl, distraught by his love for her. And going on with Lyon's article here. Right. It is a famous blush and a famous simile. Two similes, of course, but the second tends to get overlooked. Neither has been properly explained, nor for that matter has Lavinia's weeping. Why does she weep? And why does she blush? To most scholars, Lavinia is not a character with feelings and emotions. Naturally, therefore, her own state of mind cannot supply answers to these questions. But some scholars do have a sense of character, in particular in these lines. Some scholars even sense that Lavinia is in love. But with whom? If Lavinia were characterized enough to be in love, I would find this a welcome touch of color, pharmacon, in the outline of the mythos at this point. The poem would be richer. If there was any suggestion that she was in love with specifically Turnus, this would be troubling. It would seriously complicate our emotional, if not our moral response to the rapidly approaching denouement. But that is not implausible. Our responses to the denouement are pretty complex already, and it is in fact the case. Lavinia comes alive in these lines. Lavinia, the text adumbrates, is in love with Turnus. So what do you think of that?
Yeah.
Is there enough in that simile that we could kind of infer that Lavinia has as much feelings for Turnus as he apparently does for her?
Right. So I have two responses.
Yeah.
The first is, I wonder if there is some more contemporary post-19th century sense of romantic love being read into the text. In other words, looking for Lavinia to have a kind of emotional response that we may read in some 19th century novel, Victor Hugo or something.
Yes.
Now, as a counter to that, it's very similar to what happens between Dido and Aeneas.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not a good objection.
Right.
The second objection or second question is, it seems more likely that she is blushing because she has become the object of two men's attention, leading to devastation and civil war. And so she's a counterpoint to Helen's general unblushing character.
She's more Helen than she is Dido here, right?
She's more Helen than Dido.
Yes.
But she's put in a better light than Helen because Helen doesn't seem to have enough shame for the position that she's in.
Okay.
We do have that one scene. It's book 2, I think, looking, I can't remember exactly.
The Tachoscopia.
Looking down from the walls. Maybe it's book 3, actually.
Yeah.
And Priam comforts her. It's really not your fault. So she has some shame and sorrow for what she has done. But here, Lavinia seems to have a lot more.
Yeah.
So that'd be my initial response.
That's really, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I find that very persuasive. I'm not sure how much I buy the fact that we can read this as her being in love with Turnus.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that to follow that, so let's, for the sake of argument, accept that is true. I like that in that it makes Aeneas's ultimate triumph that much more messy.
Okay.
Right. And so it's another, he messed up his relationship with Dido due to the demands of fate.
Right.
And also now he's going to mess up the love affair between Turnus and Lavinia because of the demands of fate. And so it's another one of these costs that comes in the wake of Aeneas doing what is demanded of him.
Right.
And so against that, it's that huge weight that it takes to found what needs to be founded.
I find that very persuasive. Do you think that this final line, Lavinia comes alive in these lines, Lavinia, the text adumbrates, is in love with Turnus? Is this proof that she's in love with Turnus, or is it just she's presented as the very shy, naive girl who blushes when this man, Turnus, looks at her with complex emotions of love?
Right.
She can read his mind a little bit by his body language, and she's embarrassed on the spot.
Yeah. I don't think it's proof, but I do think it's an interesting idea that could lead you down some kind of fruitful interpretive paths.
Right. I like fruitful paths. Here's another question.
Yeah.
He says in the quote, "To most scholars, Lavinia is not a character with feelings and emotions." So I want to examine that question for just a moment. When a character is in a work like this, if the character does not speak, if the character does not act very much, is that indicative that the author is telling us the person has no emotions, no feelings, no purposes, or is the author doing something more subtle and complicated, just not revealing what those characters' emotions and feelings are,
right? So
that we can, with our imagination, fill it in in a way consistent with the rest of the story?
I would say choice B.
Yeah.
And with Vergil, I'm always going to give him the benefit of the doubt. It kind of reminded me of Aeschylus and his famous silent characters. He's not just putting someone on the stage for the sake of putting on the stage. It's meant to kind of draw the audience kind of uneasily in that direction, right? And so I think the same thing with Lavinia.
As Euripides famously mocks, right, in The Frogs, he brings someone on stage. Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's in the voice of...
Oh, that's right, Euripides. Sorry,
Aristophanes wrote it, but Euripides is saying he brings someone on the stage who stands there for 3 acts saying nothing.
Right.
Finally, he lets loose.
Right, exactly.
With one of those big jaw-breaking words.
Right.
But I think this kind of question here, Lavinia is not a character with feelings and emotions. That will really determine our later discussion of, so what is she doing in the novel?
Yes.
Because if she has no emotions and feelings, then, we're really not justified in speculating as to what they are.
Agreed. Yeah. All right. Let's dive into the book proper.
All right. So what would you say is the thesis, the first half of the book?
I think that it was, in prepping for this episode, I really was kind of concentrating just on the first half. I wasn't trying to read ahead. I wanted to really kind of contain it to what I knew that we'd be able to cover.
It's wise.
And
as though you didn't know the story and you were going through it for the first time.
Exactly, right. And it's been a while since I've read book 12.
Exactly.
So I wanted to kind of keep it as fresh as possible.
Yeah, as Holtzmark taught us last week, right? You have to suspend belief.
Yes.
If you're going to enjoy literature.
Exactly.
The whole thing is a fantasy world.
Exactly. And what really struck me this time around is how often Vergil puts into the speeches of Aeneas this very civilized outlook. He's starting to think about, what's beyond this war? He seems to kind of accept it. Yes, I'm chosen by fate, and I'm going to be the victor here. But that comes with a massive amount of responsibility. And so, when he's thinking about this duel with Turnus, when he's thinking about what's going to happen with his son, when he's thinking about what kind of structure the rulership is going to be after this war, he has these very kind of organized, very civilized thoughts and things to say. But when we get to almost exactly halfway through the book, he takes a turn towards the savage and the era, the rage overtakes him. And I think that's what it sets up what I take to one of the most baffling, interesting, striking endings of any story I've ever read.
Yes. Well said.
When we finally see him dueling with Turnus in the next episode.
Right.
And so this setup of kind of this descent from civilization into savagery, I think is so striking, and it has to be absolutely deliberate on Vergil's part.
Of course, yeah. And perfectly executed.
Yes. All right, Dave, as we get into the beginnings of this book, there's this wonderful simile regarding Turnus. You want to read that and talk a bit about it?
I would. So this is the Lombardo translation again. A lion prowling the fields around Carthage is wounded in the chest by hunters and only then wakens to war. Tossing his shaggy mane with joy, he snaps the spear and roars with blood-stained mouth. So too the fury mounting in Turnus. Now, I mean, it's beautifully done, right? Mm-hmm. The English here is almost as nice as the Latin. It's a very good translation.
Yes, it is.
I like it a lot. But I'm struck by the fact that it's, of course, in the Homeric mold. You have to introduce any significant action with some comparison to the world of nature.
Right.
This is what a lion does. But it struck me the fact that Carthage is brought up once again. Turnus is like a Carthaginian lion.
Yeah.
Now, the skeptic might say, well, there was a certain kind of Barbary lion that was native to North Africa in that part. But that's not a significant enough explanation, I don't think.
Right.
I think the bringing up Carthage again is a way to drive home that eternal wound between Aeneas and Dido.
Of course.
Just mention it once more.
Of course. Yeah. What do you have an opinion on whether there were Berber lions in North Africa?
Did I say Barbary? What did I say?
Barbary, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but North African lions.
Oh, there for sure was.
Okay, yeah.
There for sure were, yeah. They went extinct in historical times.
I mean, there's those lion hunt scenes from northern Greece, too, right?
Yes.
In Pella.
Yes, a much smaller lion than the Tarzanian kind.
Right, yeah.
From sub-Saharan Africa.
Nice
Thanks.
Nice callback.
Right. But there definitely were lions that lived, and I think maybe even as late as the time of St. Augustine.
That's really interesting. I'm sure there have been. Do you have they found like lion bones and skeletal remains?
I think they found the lion dum-dum, actually.
Lion dum-dum?
Where the lions met together in council.
That's right. How could I forget?
Did you forget the dum-dum already?
I forgot about the dum-dum.
Okay.
Right? All right. So
did you like the simile?
I did. I like it. And then I think later on we see Turnus also compared to a bull.
Right.
So,
yes.
Right.
Also very interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so Turnus is prowling like a lion on the battlefield. He wants to meet Aeneas in single combat to end the war once and for all.
Right.
And then what does he say?
He says, I'm not waiting. Again, this is Lombardo's translation. I'm not waiting. There's no need for Aeneas and his cowards to recant. I'll meet him in single combat. Draw up the pact, father, and begin the rites. Either this arm pitches the Asian tramp into Tartarus, with the Latins watching, and my sword restores our nation's honor, or he rules with Lavinia as his bride.
Yes.
So he's ready to roll the dice and end this thing once and for all.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you think about this as a way to resolve international geopolitical conflict?
Well, before I
Yes.
get into that, clearly this is a nod towards the kind of the interrupted duel between Menelaus and Paris.
That's correct.
Right? In the Trojan War, it was also decided, enough of this. Let's let the principals battle this out for the whole enchilada. And so Menelaus and Paris, and then, as we'll see, this duel too was interrupted in a similar kind of way.
Correct.
Right.
Menelaus breaks his sword over Paris's helmet.
Right.
And then he was skulking in the back, the third rank back, Paris was. Menelaus, Brendan Gleeson, right, in the Troy movie.
Is that who plays him?
Yeah. Calls him out, and out Paris comes, of course. What's his name again? Orlando Bloom.
Shudder.
You're not supposed to shudder. This goes way, way back to the very beginning of our podcast.
Yes.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway.
And there's that great scene
You
where...
love that scene where he grabs him by the chin strap.
Yes, I love that. He's dragging him.
Right.
It's so vivid.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't have an opinion on whether this is a good way to solve geopolitical conflicts, but clearly you've been thinking about this.
Well, I don't have a concluded or settled opinion, but my contrarian point is that we tend to think of ancient monarchical societies, warrior cultures, shame cultures, honor cultures, as limited, barbaric, and so forth. And post-Enlightenment democracy is really the way that every nation ought to operate.
Yeah. Right.
On the whole, I'm obviously very sympathetic to that. However, it strikes me that if you could really get people to agree, you put up the best man from each side, and whoever wins, the other side, whom he represents, then rules, and the losers have to submit en masse.
Yeah.
To the former.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Putin, right? There's a conflict with Putin, right? And President Biden is our current president.
Yeah.
There's conflict all over the world.
Right.
Think of how much bloodshed and treasure would be saved if we just agreed to put forward, the one best individual,
right,
man or woman, to settle it this way.
It could even be like over a round of racco.
I was saying, it doesn't have to be
blood sport.
It doesn't have to be physical, right? It could be racco. It could be a less complicated game like chess.
Yeah.
It could include both physical and mental kinds of things.
It could be like a decathlon of different kinds of...
Throw in some dancing, like Dancing with the Stars, and
then you televise it.
Correct.
Yes.
And then at the end, we just, so we've all decided so-and-so is the clear victor, and now that particular nation state is the champion in this conflict.
Yeah.
It has something to recommend it.
It does. I think you'd have a lot of trouble getting people to go along with this.
Okay.
Especially once they found themselves on the losing side.
But
some guy said, I could have played Racco better than Vice Secretary whoever.
Right. But like the Hunger Games, there would be a selection process.
I see.
So the person who represents our nation, in the Racco off, would truly be
like a Racco champion.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Not just some also ran.
Right. You ever watched any Game of Thrones?
No.
There's a recurring thing in that series where if two people have a conflict, rather than settling in a court of law, they can either duel it out in the arena, or if you can convince someone to be your champion, they fight on your behalf.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right. So it's a similar
like
kind
a mercenary.
of thing. Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole
right.
The whole rationale behind mercenaries.
And then your guilt or innocence it depends on who wins or loses that fight.
It kind of makes sense to outsource the massive conflict to just a couple of representative individuals.
Yeah. Well, I know that I have no evidence for this, but I feel I'm wary that we have any Racco geniuses out there in this land. So I think
or someone who can ride on a horse shirtless like Putin.
Exactly. Right. Well, beckoning a falcon to his arm.
Is that what he was doing?
Something like that.
We joke, but these are serious matters, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Turnus and Aeneas, this is what they're going to do.
Yes.
And I think there's something noble about it.
Yep. I do too. But Amata and Latinus, they are not in favor of it.
Right.
Because I think they kind of sense that Turnus is not long for this world.
No,
right?
he's not the man Aeneas is.
No.
So he tries to talk Turnus out of it and suggests maybe a negotiated peace with the Trojans instead.
Right, but I mean, you don't want to end in a Homeric type epic with a negotiated peace.
No.
No, nobody wants to read that.
No. But then he has kind of a Priam move, right? Mm-hmm. As in Priam's appeal to Achilles in the Iliad.
Yeah.
Have some pity on an old man who doesn't want to lose his son.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to stir up those kinds of things.
That's right.
It's like Phoenix talking to Achilles in the tent, trying to kind of reminding him of his father and his childhood.
Yep.
But it doesn't work.
No. Latinus does have this really interesting line as he's trying to persuade Turnus. He says, I never should have agreed to betroth my daughter to you. There were all of these oracles and so forth that told me otherwise. Yeah. But I was overcome by love for you and our ties of kinship.
Yeah.
So this affection, this familial attachment has led him astray.
Yeah.
It's caused him to do something contrary to the fates.
Right. And I think that now that you bring that up, that's really interesting because I think there's a thread through the Iliad that, ties of kinship transcend, being Greek or Trojan or being on one side or the other. And remember those two guys out on the battlefield who discovered that their fathers were guest friends, and they decide
Glaucon and Diomedes.
That's it, and they say we can't fight, right? Because we have these ties. So here, there's even something greater than ties of kinship, and that's the fate,
national destiny,
destiny. Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Turnus is unmoved, and in fact, he even goes so far as to mock Aeneas.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So Turnus responds to Latinus, says, "For my sake, sire, do nothing for my sake, and permit me to purchase fame with death. I too can throw spears, father, and when I strike, blood flows from the wound. His goddess mother won't be there for him, lurking in mist to hide his womanly flight in a cloud." And so it seems like Turnus has heard the Iliad.
Yes.
Because that's one of the things that happens, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, these stories are famous, even in their own generation, as we saw when Aeneas landed in Carthage. But I guess the story has reached full well throughout Italy.
Now, one question I do have was, how does Turnus know that Venus isn't going to be there? I mean, she does show up. She aids in healing Aeneas's wound where he's hit with the arrow. But how does he know? She's not going to be lurking there, and she's not going to carry him out. Does Turnus have kind of a sense that, yes, it's coming down to this final moment and nothing's going to get in the way?
Well, I wonder about the promise that Jupiter made that the gods won't interfere. And that was in Book 10, if I'm not mistaken. The gods will not interfere in this conflict as they did on the plains of Troy. But how does Turnus know?
Yeah.
That's one of those questions.
You don't. You're not supposed to ask.
Exactly.
Right.
The poet controls the world, and you're not really allowed to complain about it.
Yeah, exactly.
What about Amata? Doesn't she try to persuade Turnus?
She does. It's the same thing. It's in the context of her attempt to persuade Turnus that we get the simile with Lavinia that we started the episode with, and this too, Turnus. I mean, he seems to be kind of frozen for a moment because of his deep love for Lavinia, as the text says, but it's not enough for him to step aside from this duel.
No, I don't want to ask any uncomfortable questions here of a familial nature.
Go ahead.
Dr. Winkle.
I'm an open book.
But doesn't Amata have a whole lot more devotion to and affection for her son-in-law than most mothers-in-law that I have encountered?
I think that's true. Right.
That's a generalization, but is there something to it?
No, I mean, it just, now that you bring it up, it does strike me as kind of rather
it's intense.
Strange. It is very intense.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's anything untoward about it.
Yeah.
But it's unusual to me that she has that much attachment to Turnus. I guess she just really she's been addled by a fury, but even before that, did she really believe this is the best man for my daughter? Right. And I want no one to take his place?
Right.
She's very attached to him.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of my own situation.
Oh.
One of the things that my wife...
Your mother-in-law loves you that much.
She does. And one of the things that my wife complains about is how I can do no wrong in my mother-in-law's eyes. That's right. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
You are the Turnus.
It doesn't have the intensity of Amata and Turnus, but there's something. I recognize that.
That's great. That's great. Do you have any brothers-in-law? Does Becca have any brothers?
She has one brother. Yes,
exactly. I feel sorry for that guy.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's
third place.
He's far out. He's out in Oregon, and so He's on the periphery in more ways than one.
He's the Aeneas.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
So what does Amata say to Turnus?
Well, she says in Lombardo's words, "This one thing I beg of you, do not commit yourself to this combat. Whatever fate awaits you in battle awaits me also, and together with you, I will leave this hateful light before I see Aeneas as my captor and my son."
Maybe that explains it a little bit. Her fate is inexorably tied to that of Turnus. When Turnus dies, she dies.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not so much affection for Turnus, but self-preservation.
Yeah.
I love this closing line. I will leave this hateful life before I see Aeneas as my captor and my son. Now, she does commit suicide.
Right.
So here she's presaging it.
Exactly. Now, this might be a better discussion for next week, but I mean, what are the traditions about Aeneas and Lavinia after the action of the Aeneid? I'm not aware of any kind of strong kind of mythological or narrative tradition about.
Not that I can remember.
Today, I mean, it just seems like it.
They moved to Alba Longa.
Right.
Started playing pickleball, if I remember.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Lavinia took up baking and
macrame.
Yeah. Aeneas would complain a little bit about how the furniture was arranged.
Right. Yeah, the feng shui wasn't working.
He'd shuffle out of the house and ride for hours, and the relationship was strained at times because Lavinia is no Dido,
right?
Much less Creusa, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And he would sometimes confuse names. He'd inadvertently call her Creusa or Dido.
Oh man,
that was obviously very hurtful for Lavinia.
Right.
So I'm not sure how she got her revenge.
Yeah, it's just everything seems to presage that this is going to be a disaster.
Yes.
The relationship is going to be...
But you're looking for, a Victorian kind of relationship. You're looking for, true love.
But Vergil has already set up in Book 4 about what true passion could be, right?
Yeah, but it couldn't be. It failed.
It failed, but not because of Aeneas or Dido. It failed because of the demands of this faceless fate.
And that's what makes it a tragic story.
Yeah.
What he really wants, he cannot have, right?
Yeah.
And what she really wants, she can't have.
Yes.
Because they are representatives of their respective nations.
Yeah.
Just like in that duel between our appointed hero and any other world leader, they got to take one for the team.
Right. It just sets up, it's another reminder to me, kind of this tension between this national epic that is kind of explaining how kind of the gods and fate are behind the founding of Rome. It's also imbued with kind of a non-happy ending. Right. There's a darkness about it. And that's one of the things I find most interesting about it.
That's what makes it a good story.
That's what makes it a good story. But it would seem like at a glance that you would expect that to end on a high note.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it doesn't.
Yeah. So here, let me make a point that I think I've made many times in many ways, but it's more clear to me now. I like stories where there is moral and psychological realism, even if the surface details are fantastical and unbelievable.
Okay.
So that's the opposite, right?
Yes.
Of today. Today we have stories. I'm not talking about comic book stories, but we have stories that are more believable and plausible in terms of not divine intervention by 30 different gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
But they lack, to my mind, psychological and moral verity because the characters act in ways that real people don't and can't act.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. Do you have an example like at the tip of your tongue? Because I find that a really interesting idea. And I think you're right. I'm just wondering, do you have I just watched this or just read this and I saw this?
No.
Okay.
I can't think of one. No.
Right.
But to me, the complaint about, reading Greek epic or Greek tragedy that, the god intervenes and rescues and the other kinds of niggling sort of criticisms, that's not how the world is.
Right.
They miss the point.
Yeah.
Because the realism is how people behave and act.
Yes. I think this would be a very superficial example
Okay.
of this is if I watch a current movie that is set in a high school.
Okay.
Right. And everything looks like high school.
Right.
And even if the actors and actors maybe look a little bit too old for their role,
yes.
It looks like high school, but I always come away with, that's not how teenagers talk, and that's not how they act, that's not how they think.
Right. It's not what they desire. It's not what they prioritize. It's not where they're headed.
It always feels so false.
That's a good example.
Okay.
So a lot of time is spent on fooling the eye, you might say.
Yes.
With secondary kinds of considerations.
Right.
And maybe this is why the starkness of, say, the Athenian stage is so appealing.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't time spent on elaborate setting and staging and so forth.
Right. And interestingly enough is when they did devote time to that, it was kind of it was when everything was kind of falling apart.
Yeah, the audience didn't really care about it.
Right.
What was so real was the way that people behaved as, conveyed in the dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Jeff, we're coming up on the arming scene, are we not?
Another classic Homeric archetype.
That's correct.
And so Turnus is, again, he's wasting no time. He's getting ready for this fight. He seems to have a kind of death wish. He wants his name to be made, whether that's in the ground or standing above it. And so he goes out and he gets all his armor together, and then he has this nice little speech that he gives to his spear.
Right.
Right. And we've got some Latin here. You want to read some Latin?
I would. And speaking of Latin,
yes,
I would like to mention that for teaching of Latin, the noun arma, right? Arma, armorum. It's a neuter collective. It means weapons. Mm-hmm. I have to typically encourage students not to translate it as arms, because that's not really used so much anymore as a word for weapons.
That's true.
And it leads them into some odd combinations. For example, they were carrying their arms on their shoulders. So no,
right.
You want to say weapons.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Vociferans hunc o numquam frustrata vocatus, hasta meos nunc tempus adest te maximus actor, te turni nunc dextra gerit da sternera corpus, lordri camque manu valida lacarara revulsam, semiveri frigiset foedardrin pura crinas, vibratos calido ferdro muraque madentis.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
I like the conceit of addressing an inanimate object.
I do too.
It's the spear has a personality. It's kind of like B.B. King with his guitar Lucille.
That's right.
And so there's something kind of cool about this.
Absolutely. I have to make a correction. It's madentis.
Madentis.
It's madentis. It's long. But in the penultimate line that I read, we have semi-weary frigus, the Phrygian half-man, right?
That's awesome.
The Phrygian half-man, which I believe Lombardo translates as eunuch.
Eunuch,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to read the translation?
Sure. Spear that has never failed my call, the hour has come. Actor once bore you mightily, and now you are in the hand of Turnus. Grant that I lay the Phrygian eunuch out on the ground, rip away his corselet, and grind into dirt his pretty hair, crisped with curling irons and dripping with myrrh.
More hair?
More hair. I love this. And so he's using kind of feminizing language to insult Aeneas.
Yeah, the Eastern dandy.
Yeah.
This goes all the way back to, of course, the Iliad.
Right.
And then it reappears in Herodotus.
Yes.
It was a common trope.
Yep.
So the episode that you named, All's Hair in Love and War.
I remember it.
That's proven to be quite successful. However, if I may say with some umbrage,
yes,
the one that I named, male pattern baldric.
One of my favorites.
That's funny.
It is very funny.
That's a dog in terms of downloads.
It's not because of the title.
Are you sure?
That title is gold.
Maybe people didn't know what to do with it. Male pattern baldric. What is that?
I love it.
I thought it was on point.
It's very on point. It's in my top 5.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And speaking of downloads.
Yes?
You keep waiting for me to go to the ads, but I'm not doing it.
Okay, well, all right.
We recently passed 90,000.
Fantastic.
We have 90,000 separate downloads of our 120-odd episodes.
Maybe when we get to 100,000, we could do some kind of giveaway.
I think we should do that.
Yeah.
Give away the farm?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Speaking of giving away the farm,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
Finally. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Dave, I believe you got a review that you want to share?
Yes, I do. Yes, this was written by one Daniel Maudlin in Weird magazine.
Wired.
Sorry, Wired.
Right. There was a Weird magazine.
No.
Yes, there was. It's like
Really?
like sci-fi tales.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, okay. But so this is Wired.
Wired magazine, August 18, 2020. Mr. Maudlin writes, perfection in a Chemex is hard to come by.
Chemex?
Chemex is a way of brewing coffee,
Okay.
Jeff. Just stay with us here, please.
Okay.
Is not something I or my friend have been able to do well consistently. I've tried to be as finicky as they come, but ultimately I've convinced myself that part of the beauty of the Chemex method comes from the rarity of success. That's hogwash. Come on. It's like baseball. If it works a third of the time, then that's pretty remarkable.
Okay.
When you fail, you still end up with drinkable coffee, although that's somewhat debatable. At times, it can be so oily that the coffee can stick to your tongue throughout the rest of the day, or it can even taste like a cup of Mr. Coffee, which is drinkable but disappointing, considering the amount of effort put in. I continued on, though, convincing myself that I was learning something by using the Chemex, that's the pour-over method, about what I did wrong with every brew. But at a certain point, I accepted that my technique wasn't improving. Too many variables, not enough constants. I would say too many mathematical metaphors. Instead of searching for a solution, I resigned myself to settling down to a lifetime of imperfect Chemex batches and wasted artisanal coffee beans. Then I saw a coffee maker that could make consistently delicious Chemex-style pour-over staring at me from across the room.
So for Daniel, at some point, the heavens opened.
Yes.
And a ray of light descended upon a ratio 6 or 8.
A ratio 8.
Yes.
Yeah. That's quite an interesting review.
It is.
Not badly written,
That's
it seems to me.
Some purple prose there.
There you go. So the ratio 8 is staring at him from across the room, just
Beckoning
like
him.
it does for you. And you would say about the ratio 8?
Oh, I love it. I used it this morning, as I use it almost every morning. If I'm home, I'm using the ratio.
That's right.
Right. And so I get the water poured in the night before. I get my hand blown glass carafe waiting.
Borosilicate.
Yes, I have my metal cone in there
Right.
waiting. And
Oh, you're not using paper anymore.
No. I
graduated.
upgraded to it, and I love it.
Yes.
That's a game changer.
It is, really.
And then I put the grounds in the morning, hit that button, and then there's bloom, there's brew, there's ready, and you're set to go.
You're set to go. Can I ask, what do you do with your old grounds?
I put, my wife is a composter.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah. And so we put them in the composter.
Okay.
Yeah.
How large is the pile of uncomposted grounds behind your house?
It's disturbingly large.
It's massive, isn't it?
That's right.
Pyramidal, you would say?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Same for you?
Yes, pyramidal. Starting to block the view of the neighbors.
Yeah.
So let's say one of our avid listeners says to himself or herself, I would like to up my coffee game. What should they do?
And have a similar experience to Mr. Maudlin here.
That's right.
They should go to ratiocoffee.com. That's
Okay.
RATIO coffee.com. They should find the machine they want, the ratio 6 or the bigger brother, ratio 8.
In a wide variety of finishes.
Yes.
All handmade in Portland, Oregon.
Yep. Beautiful works of art these things are. And then in the coupon code box, they should type in ANCO 3F.
Yes.
What does that F
3F.
stand for? Is that flavor?
I think the F stands for flavor.
Yes.
Flavonoidal.
Yes.
Something like that.
So ANCO3F, and Dave, that will get them
15% off and the opportunity to support this podcast.
which is priceless. Thank you.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good people at Hackett Publishing. With offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Indianapolis, Indiana, Hackett has been bringing high-quality translations to a mass audience inexpensively for many, many years.
Yes. And listeners, if you have been listening to these Aeneid episodes, you have heard us almost every one of these gushing over Mr. Stanley Lombardo's translation of the Aeneid.
Yes.
And it's wonderful. You can find that at Hackett Publishing, along with many other of Mr. Lombardo's translations.
Yes,
as
2
well.
T's in Hackett.
Yes. And so if you want to pick that up, which I highly recommend, or many of the other Hackett volumes we have referenced in many other episodes, or from if you want to get outside of classics, philosophy,
Right.
Islamic studies,
Asian studies,
Asian
South American studies.
historiography from kind of all eras of human history, you're going to find it at Hackett. So yes,
I would like to read a little something here that
please.
I didn't write. I went back to ChatGPT and I asked them, why is Hackett Publishing so good? And this is what they said.
okay,
Hackett Publishing is known for publishing high-quality translations and scholarly editions of classical works in philosophy, literature, and the humanities. So far, pretty good, right?
yeah,
The company was founded in 1972 by philosopher and classicist Roger Hackett and has since become a leading publisher of works in the Western philosophical tradition with a focus on ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, medieval philosophy, and the Enlightenment. Now, I don't know if this is so good because I don't know if there ever was a Roger Hackett. There's a problem with these. They're called hallucinations.
yeah.
These AI bots, they can hallucinate. So I once asked them, what is the website Latin Per Diem? Just out of vain curiosity.
Yes.
And they said it was founded by former papal Latinist Reginald Foster and Daniel Gallagher.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really interesting news to me.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
I tried that in a couple variations. I kept getting a different person who was behind it.
Just hallucinating.
Yeah, making up some of the facts.
Interesting. So there might not actually be a Mr.
I don't know
Hackett
if there's
here.
a Roger Hackett. It sounds a little made up. I'm surprised it didn't say Roger Staubach there. Something like that.
The quarterback, right.
But the rest of it, very, very accurate. Right?
Yeah, interesting.
Hackett's additions, to continue, are known for their accuracy and fidelity to the original texts, as well as their affordability and accessibility to students and general readers.
It's almost like the AI's been listening to this podcast.
Exactly. I hope so, for its sake.
Wow.
So let's say that the avid listener wants to get some good summer reading.
Yes.
Read some of those things maybe they've never read. People talk about Plato's Republic, but have they read it?
Right.
Here's what they can do.
Yeah, and especially if you don't want to give your money to that massive corporation that's threatening to take over the world, that Nile Rivery corporation.
What now?
You know what I'm talking about. Go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Find the books you want. Drop them in the little satchel. And what's our coupon code for this one?
AN2023.
AN2023, and that will get you 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
You can't miss. Check it out. All right, Jeff, as we get back into things, we have here another epic simile. Now Turnus is not being compared to the Carthaginian lion. He's being compared to a rampaging bull.
That's right.
And I'd like to read these 4 lines from Lombardo here. He says, when a bull prepares to fight, he bellows horrifically and, concentrating his anger in his horns, charges a tree trunk and spars with the wind or scatters sand with his hooves. The raging bull.
The raging bull, yeah.
This doesn't bode well for Turnus's final destiny.
No, it does
when
not.
he is compared to violent animals who will eventually be hunted and killed.
Exactly. And in this case, a bull that's not even charging the opponent.
Right.
It's like Don Quixote.
He's charging a tree.
He's tilting at windmills, right?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
The bull is a little off balance, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. This predicts what ultimately is going to happen.
This is called forebulling, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the term, right? And so now the narrative switches over to Aeneas.
Okay.
We've gotten a lot of Turnus here.
Right.
And how is Aeneas feeling about this? And I'll pick it up here with more Lombardo. Aeneas too was like this, a fierce presence in the armor his mother had given him. He whetted his soul for war, and he fanned his anger, glad that the war would be settled on the terms offered. Then he comforted his comrades in Iulus, who was sad and afraid, reminding them of his destiny, and he ordered that a firm and clear response be conveyed to King Latinus, declaring the terms of peace. So now this is what I was saying at the beginning, is that, okay, Aeneas is prepared to do what he needs to do on the battlefield, but he's not just thinking about kind of his white-hot hatred for Turnus, right? He recognizes there's a lot more at stake here.
And he's still self-controlled.
He's self-controlled.
He's still calm.
He's accepting his destiny, and he recognizes that there's a lot more to come that he needs to take care of. And so I thought this might be an interesting way to think about the narrative. Is so if the audience is meant to be thinking about the Iliad, which I think we are in many turns, right? So at this point now, we have Turnus is more like Achilles at the end of the Iliad. Raging, right? And Aeneas is now, he's more like a Hector. He's more civilized, and he's more circumspect about everything.
Correct.
Right? And so it would seem that just from kind of a connect the dots narrative point, it would mean, okay, Aeneas' time is up.
In the same way that Hector expired.
Exactly. But of course, we know that's not true.
Right.
But from looking at kind of that dualistic, nature versus civilization point of view, this would also seem to be kind of setting up a triumph of civilization over savagery, like the Lapis and the Centaurs.
Very interesting.
Right. And so I think that's one of the ways that Vergil is kind of keeping the audience kind of that knife edge. Like, where is this going?
Very nice. Right. To add to that, maybe not to add to it, but just develop it, is I think one of the themes, if not the dominant theme of the Iliad, is the contest between nature and nurture. Achilles is naturally the better man. Mm-hmm. Agamemnon is the better man by convention.
Right.
By politics. And this enrages Achilles.
Yes.
Why can't the natural lion, right, to use Platonic and Nietzschean terms, why can't the natural lion just rule and be at the top of the food chain where he belongs? No, he's got to submit to Agamemnon. Right. So what's going on here then in the Aeneid is that Aeneas is the force of culture, and he's not here enraged.
Right, exactly. Which makes it all the more striking when we get to the middle of this book is when Aeneas starts to shed a lot of that. Right. And I think that's really, it's shocking. And it makes the audience wonder, okay, where exactly this is going, and what does this ultimately mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I just have to mention these 3 lines here from Lombardo. Mm-hmm. This is what critics call formulaic. language, right? And they don't like formulae for some crazy reason. They're not watching the Three Stooges. But this is a beautiful translation.
Okay.
Dawn scattered radiance on the mountaintops as the horses of the sun rose from the sea, breathing light from flared nostrils.
Ooh.
That's really
That
well
is
done.
really nice. That is nice.
That's English made to sound beautiful.
Yeah.
To which it is not naturally susceptible, I would say.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great.
So, Jeff, where are we going next?
Well, okay, so then it seems like this duel is going to happen. The Rutulians and their allies and the Trojans and their allies, they clear space before the walls of the city.
What kinds of things are they clearing out of the way?
Oh, they got the big dust brooms. There's a lot of
some old cars are parked there that
cars
don't
are
belong.
parked, fast food bags.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of litter. If you're going to have a duel, you want a nice tidy space.
Clean space.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and everybody's watching. Of course, the soldiers, people on the walls, and even we learn that Juno is sitting on a nearby hill watching this.
She just likes a good fight, or what's her interest?
Well, I mean, as we've seen all along, is that Juno knows what ultimately has to happen.
Yeah.
But she says, okay, if I can't write the end, I'm going to mess up the middle as much as possible. So she's continuing kind of throwing these monkey wrenches into the works here.
And she speaks here to Juturna, who is the sister of Turnus.
Right.
And Juturna is a nymph.
Right. She's a minor river goddess.
And what does she say?
She says to Juturna, "Nymph, glory of rivers, my heart's delight, you know how I have given you preference over all the Latin girls who have climbed into Jove's thankless bed. You alone I have gladly given a place in heaven. Learn now, Juturna, your sorrow, and do not blame me. While fortune seemed to allow it and fates permitted Latium to prosper, I protected Turnus in your city. Now I see him facing a destiny he does not deserve. His doom is upon him, and the fatal stroke is near. I cannot look upon this ordained combat. If you dare to help your brother now, go on. It becomes you. It may still be that better fortune will befall the damned." At this, Juturna wept profusely, and 4 times her hand beat her lovely breast. But Juno cried, "There is no time for tears. Hurry! And if there is any way at all, save your brother from death, or renew the war and strike the treaty from their hands. I, Juno, order you to dare."
That's a really interesting speech.
It is.
Starts out by saying, I actually like you, despite the fact you have cheated with my husband, right? I actually like you. You alone I have gladly given a place in heaven. I protected your brother. He doesn't deserve his destiny. But now, don't blame me and do me this favor.
Right. I don't think Juno actually does like her. I think
I don't think so
she's
either.
Using her.
Exactly.
Right.
Highly manipulative.
She is simply a means to kind of a jaded end here.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I think Juno has in some ways has kind of accepted the fate, but she says, well, as long as I can put it off, I'm going to put it off.
Right.
We've talked about kind of that the rule of oracles, and oracle must come true.
Right.
But what happens between point A and point B is often up for grabs.
It's like one of those novels that I enjoyed as a kid, and you probably did as well, the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Oh, yeah.
Turn to page such and such. And were you one of those kids that turned to those pages and read through all the alternate endings, or did you accept the fantasy and read through it as instructed?
I think I tried to do the former, but probably was more of the latter, but was more of the former.
So you tried to just follow instructions so you would maintain the guise of plausibility and therefore enjoy it more. Right. But you ended up taking shortcuts. I often
give it in and kind of flipping through it. Right. I remember there was one maddening book where there was like if you opened it right to the middle, there was this large picture of kind of this idealized city. It was called Utopia. Okay. But no choice you ever made would get you there, and that drove me crazy.
It's like those mazes on the Denny's menu, right? Once you go in, there's no way out.
No, exactly. It's Hotel California.
There's no pile of pancakes at the end. You just keep going. But I wonder if it's similar here to what Juno was doing. Every choose your own endings results in the establishment of Aeneas as king of Italy and his marriage to Lavinia.
Yes.
But you get to take many byways on the way.
Exactly. Right. That's where, in some ways, that's where the really interesting stuff happens.
Right.
And so Juno recognizes that. And so she says, I'm going to, she wants to keep Turnus alive, of course, for the sake of keeping Turnus alive. But she also wants to make, if Aeneas is going to get this lauded fate, she is going to make him pay for it dearly.
But Aeneas is a pious individual.
Oh, as we've seen.
Yes.
I've complained about how many
you're
sacrifices.
about to complain again. Here he offers a very civilized prayer.
Yes.
Does the civilized Aeneas. Shall I read it?
Yeah, please do.
I call to witness the sun and this land for which I have endured many trials, and the Father Almighty, and you his consort, Saturnia, that's Juno. Kinder at last now, goddess, I pray, and Mars in his glory, father of all war. And I call upon the springs and rivers, and the powers of the air, and the blue sea. If victory falls to Turnus the Ausonian, the vanquished will withdraw to Evander's city. Iulus shall leave this land, and Aeneas' sons will never return to renew this war, or challenge this realm with the sword. But if victory grants that we win the field, as I think shall be, and may the gods so confirm, I will not demand that Italians be subject to Teucrians, nor seek dominion for myself. Let both nations unconquered commit to everlasting peace under equal laws. I will ordain rights and gods. Latinus, my father-in-law, will retain command. Authority will remain with my father-in-law. For me, the Teucrians will raise my city walls, and Lavinia will give the town her name.
Not just extraordinary lines. That's an extraordinary sentiment.
It is.
And he's saying, like, even if I win, I'm not taking over.
Correct.
I will step aside and allow the people who are already ruling to keep ruling.
You see, the Romans are a just and fair people. They
Yes.
didn't just run roughshod over everyone. The Pax Augusta is a good thing for everybody.
And there's also,
I'm saying that with some facetiousness, you understand.
Right, of course. But I mean, Caesar's Clementia here as
Exactly.
well. Right?
It's what it is. It's his Clementia.
As long as you're loyal to Rome, we'll let you more or less kind of keep on as you've been keeping on.
Yeah, not the we, though, in that instance. The I, right?
Yes.
Caesar, and this is what I think, I'm glad you brought this up, this is what made all of his contemporaries so angry. A citizen cannot grant forgiveness to another citizen who doesn't need it.
Right.
I haven't given you some kind of civil pardon because I don't have authority over you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is probably what makes Turnus so angry.
Sure.
The clemency is hollow.
Yeah. But from that point of view of kind of civilization and savagery, you notice that how Aeneas he's in his prayer, he's kind of nodding towards Juno.
Right.
You seem kinder. I hope you're kinder now.
He's trying to make peace with everybody.
Right. He's also kind of thinking not really about the duel right now. He's thinking about everything kind of after the duel. And I mean, in some ways, I think that Aeneas has accepted that fate is on his side. He's starting to kind of see that. He's starting to smell it. So when he says,
it's book 12, it's about time.
It's about time. But he says, if victory falls to Turnus the Ausonian, he knows that's not going to happen. So it's kind of an easy thing for him to say. But
that's true.
But he comes off as very, on the level.
Correct.
He's saying, if I lose here, we're gonna, either go to we'll back off to live with Evander,
right,
or we'll leave entirely.
Right.
You have nothing to worry about.
Nothing to worry
So
about.
this is so strikingly different than kind of the
what
gnashing of
next?
the gnashing of teeth that we see from Turnus, and certainly with comparison to what comes next. Yes.
But then as they come forward on the plain, the Rutulians, that is the supporters of Turnus, they start to panic a little bit, right? And why do they do that?
Because they see, it's obvious who the better man is here. And so now they're saying, well, we put all our chips with this guy.
Right.
And so they're starting to kind of to freak out. And that's when Juturna, following Juno's lead, she disguises herself as one of their own and starts moving amongst the Rutulian army and kind of just shames them into action.
Yes.
That's a very kind of Homeric type of thing.
Absolutely.
It's like Odysseus, after they're freaking out and running for the ships early on, he shames them back to the battlefield.
Yeah, and beats Thersites as an example.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's a
bird sign.
A very Roman-y bird sign.
We haven't had a bird in a long time.
No.
I think this is the one in which the eagle comes down and snatches a goose.
Yes.
And then what do the rest of the gooses do?
They
rise up and they beat the eagle.
That's right.
And they take back their wounded comrade.
And so they say, now that's a sign that seems to be on our side.
Yes, I don't know exactly how, but
Right.
my augury is not so good.
Right. But the Rutulians take this as, okay, the gods are on our side. And so their knees get much less weak in that moment.
And then the whole thing breaks up how?
Well, we have kind of
Tolumnius.
He's kind of our Pandarus character from the Iliad. He's
to start the battle.
So remember, in the Iliad, it's Pandarus who shoots the arrow that breaks up the duel, and the war gets going. And here it's Tolumnius. He throws his spear, and that's when all of Hades breaks loose.
Yes.
And it's full on war once again.
Would you like me to read a little bit of the Latin there, if I may?
I would.
Lines 288 and following. Messapus regem regisquin signe gerentem, tire naula stena vadus confundere foetus, adver so proteret equo rubatilla recadenes, et misera passatis aturgin volvater ardris, incaput in cumerosat fervidus, advolat hosta, messapus te lo quorantem multa trabali, de super altus quo gravater fert atquita fa tur.
So I would argue that
Jeff.
What?
You always say nicely done.
Nicely done. Oh, it doesn't go without saying.
Yeah, but I like it.
Okay, I will say it. That was wonderfully read.
Thank you.
Right.
I appreciate that.
So
That was real hurt in my voice there.
I hear it, and I apologize. So I would argue here that, and I think Vergil is showing us as the war kind of blazes back up, it's at least at this point that it's the Rutulian side that is acting uncivilized and
Yes.
really following kind of the code of war such as it is. And
Whereas Aeneas, as we'll see, he's still hewing to the line of order and decency.
right, he's still trying to kind of call people back to reason and,
Right.
and to calm. So the translation of those lines, Messapus in his zeal to overturn the truce in Etruscan, this man, a king and wearing a king's insignia, backed away, tripped and fell and head and shoulders onto an altar behind him. Messapus was over him in a flash, spear in hand, and although Aulestes, poor wretch, pleaded long, came down hard on him with his beam of a spear and said, "He's had it, one of our better victims for the great God." So it's not just killing the enemy in the battle, killing him on an altar,
Yeah.
and using kind of the language of human sacrifice.
Yeah, so the
right?
killing on the altar takes us back to book 2, right? There's the parallelism where Priam is killed by Pyrrhus at the altar
Yes.
in the burning city of Troy.
Yes, exactly.
There's the correspondence.
Right. And then just a little bit more. The Italians crowded around and stripped the body while it was still warm.
You got to let the body cool.
Before you strip it,
You don't take his Air Jordans while the body's still warm, or the Rolex.
you gotta let it go to room temperature.
Exactly.
At least, right. So
Savage.
very savage, right? And so, even in the midst of this, Aeneas is still calling for order. Again, Lombardo, but
Banging his gavel, you might say.
yes, exactly. To no avail. But steadfast Aeneas, head bare, stood stretching out his unarmed hand and calling in a loud voice to his men, "Where are you going? What is this sudden surge of strife? Hold in your rage. Cohibita iras
Yes.
is the Latin. The truce has already been struck in terms set. I alone have the right to fight. Let me do it. Forget your fears. This hand will make the treaty true. These rights have already given Turnus. To me."
Boy, you're getting quite animated
Oh,
there.
this is great stuff.
This is hitting a chord with you, striking a chord.
I really, really enjoyed this, and it's right at that moment.
Zip.
And
Right.
an arrow comes out of nowhere and hits him in the leg. And I like that Vergil he mentions this, that we don't know who shot it,
Right.
and we don't know if it was guided by a god.
Yes.
It's kept mysterious.
Huh.
But it's kind of
Came from the bow of Apollo, maybe?
something like that. But it shuts Aeneas up, and he's wounded badly enough that he has to be taken to the medical tent.
This gives Turnus an opportunity for an Aristeia.
Yeah.
He goes on a rampage, right? Killing Eumenes, the son of Dolon, right? And then has this speech where he's braying about his conquest.
Yes.
Take a good look, Trojan, at these fields, the Hesperia you came to conquer in war. Lie there and measure out every acre. This is the reward for those who try me with a sword, and this is how they build their city walls.
Right. Now, and so I think the mention of Dolon's son deliberately takes us back to the Iliad.
That's right.
And then just in terms of that constant kind of back and forth, okay, who's mapping onto Achilles, who's mapping onto Hector here, with Aeneas being withdrawn from the war, and when he leaves the Rutulian surge, that reminds me very much of Achilles going to his tent.
That's
when
right.
So now through that lens, Aeneas is now our Achilles, where he was
Right.
just our Hector.
Right.
So this is constantly kind of pulling us back and forth, which I find so intriguing and wonderful.
The intriguing part I get, but someone might say, this is not wonderful. Play to type. Let us figure out, who's who here. For whom do I cheer? Because you're starting to verge toward the revisionist interpretation of the Aeneid, that Aeneid is not the true hero. He's more complicated.
Well, I don't think it doesn't be revisionist to say that he's complicated.
Well, I mean, is he celebrating Augustus and his regime? Is that what Vergil is doing?
Yes.
According to the ancients, he had two purposes, right? Imitate and outdo Homer and celebrate Augustus.
Right.
If Aeneas is too complicated, it's not a celebration of the Augustan victory.
I mean, I will stand by the fact, I don't think it's revisionist, is that it's not as clear cut as that. It's
Okay.
not that simple, right? I think there's so much here that I think you can obviously read as a critique as much as a celebration.
Okay.
Right?
But that is that is kind of the revisionist position.
I think it's the better reading.
All right.
All right.
Well, we'll get more into that as we wrap up. Do we have time to talk about Mr. Miyagi?
You got the clock in front of you.
Yeah, we're getting up against it, but
Okay.
we could talk a little bit about Mr. Miyagi.
All right. So Aeneas is
Just to wrap up this, this part where he's got the wound in his leg.
right. So he goes back to the tent, and a certain Iapix is called forward. He's the healer. We learn that he's beloved of Apollo, and of course Apollo's son is Asclepius. He has connections with not only just healing, but of course arrows.
So he's got the lab coat. And
Yeah.
he's got that, the bottom of an orange juice can on his forehead.
Exactly. So he comes wandering, and he's got all his potions and all his herbs, but
Right.
everything that he puts forward onto him, it doesn't work.
Nothing works.
But this moment struck me as kind of archetypal.
Did you try any Windex like the guy in
and
Big Fat Greek Wedding?
He should have had that in a holster or something, right? But it did remind me of that moment from the Karate Kid. You mentioned Mr. Miyagi is where Daniel LaRusso. It looks like he's out of the tournament.
Is Daniel LaRusso the Ralph Macchio character?
Yes, right.
Okay.
He's our.
I didn't know his name.
He's the hero, and he's up against Johnny Lawrence. This
guy's name is Johnny Lawrence.
It is. He's the blonde villain, right? Cobra Kai. And they're on the mat. It's the climactic match.
Okay.
And, Johnny has swept the leg.
So he's injured.
He's injured. He can barely stand up.
Yeah.
And so they take him back to the locker room. And the referee is going to tell them, hey, we got to make a decision here.
Right.
And
throw the match, right?
Throw the match.
Get back in or
give
you're
up
done.
there. And Mr. Miyagi is starting to tell Daniel, you've come this far. Nobody expected this. There's no shame in bowing out.
Right.
But Daniel begs for help. And that's where Mr. Miyagi claps his hands together and rubs them.
Okay.
And then he puts them onto the wound. And
This is the same guy that made burgers and fries on Happy Days?
Exactly right. Arnold. Right,
Okay.
right. So he applies some kind of ancient Okinawan
Magic.
healing art.
Yeah.
Right. And by putting his warmed up hands on Daniel's wound.
Someone told him to put the balm on.
Exactly. Who gave him a balm? That's about a balm. And that makes him well enough to limp back out there
and win.
And then finally use the crane kick to win the whole thing. So, so Aeneas is out there and needs special help. And this is where
Iapix shows up.
Then with an assist from Venus,
Okay.
who goes to Crete, grabs some magic herb,
That's fast.
slips it into Iapix's pocket, and
Wow.
kind of taps him and says, hey, use this.
It was a dittany? Is that what the herb was?
Yes, right.
Right.
And then when he uses it,
She got to Crete and back, and
goddesses can move quick.
that's incredible.
And what happens is once he applies the dittany, the arrow falls out and it's immediately wounded. The wound is healed.
Right.
And now it's like, hey, it's time to get back out there. Right.
So you apply the dittany, and then the litany of your woes dissipates.
That's right, exactly right.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Now he's healed and he's ready to jump back into action?
Right. And we're very close to the point where I think he starts to kind of shed his civilized nature, and he's going towards the era. He's going towards the main end.
The anger.
The rage.
Well, that seems like a good place for us to off-ramp from this particular episode.
I would agree. All right.
You like how I made a noun into a verb there?
I did. I always like the...
Off-ramp something?
Yes, right.
You notice how people are saying surface?
Are they?
They're using it as a verb all the time. It used to be restricted to submarines, but now they're using it for concerns and interests. Could you just surface those interests a little more?
I haven't heard that.
You haven't heard that?
No,
Good for you.
That's maddening.
It's terrible.
Exactly. Right. So I hate it when people let's table that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh. No,
It's not going to end.
No, it's not going to end. But okay, we can't go down that that dark hole. All right.
But we have mentioned many of the things that bother us.
We have,
and so it's been a successful episode.
I agree.
We need to thank some people.
We do, but before we thank some people, you want to tell us a little bit about the Moss method?
Well, yesterday the smash sale ended, and it was quite successful. We got some good response.
Fantastic.
We offered 20% off.
Oh man!
On the Moss method for Greek, self-paced, expert, and accessible, and the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata course that I offer. Some people took advantage of that so that they could, launch into the world of studying Greek and Latin for the summer. It was a good idea.
Fantastic.
But if you want to master these languages, it's not going to come quickly, but it's not painful. It's actually delightful, and you can have me as your psychopampos, your soul guide,
nice,
to take you through this. So go to mossmethod.com, check out our program. You can watch a sample lesson. Or go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI if you want to study Latin.
Lots of free stuff in both places to check out. Right?
Exactly. We're almost up to 2,000 free lessons on my YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
Which is, represents a lot of work, and I'm proud of it. I'm glad to have been able to do that.
Very cool.
And as I've said before, it may not be the best program, but I am pretty confident it is the best value in terms of combination of expertise, guidance, and the cost. It's a good value.
Well said. Check it out, people.
And we need to thank some folks.
Yes.
We want to thank Mishka, our sound engineer.
Yep, for the wonderful work that she does and how quick of a turnaround she gives us each and every time. Thanks to Scott Vincent and Ken Tamplin for the great music. Although I admit this week I kind of missed the Tarzan yell.
You did?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's funny because I missed the standard intro music.
You did?
It
Okay.
seemed something was a little bit off. So
Okay, all right. Well, we're back to...
we're back at it
We're
with
back
the
at
bumper
it.
music, and you can check out Scott Van Zen. You can participate in his online guitar lessons. Guy's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Or can learn how to sing like nobody else.
Yep. Check out his Vocal Academy. And if you want to write to us, if you want to, with an idea for an episode, a question, a complaint.
Yes.
If you want a shout out, we need some shout outs.
That's right. Write to jeff@adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or write to Dave at adnauseam.com. Again, do not forget that V.
On our website, you can go to the Lurch with Merch section. Pick yourself up a hat or a T-shirt with some nice Latin slogan. Very, very interesting.
Go into the summer with style.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jeff, what are we doing next week?
We're going to wrap it up. We're going to finally get to the end of the Aeneid. I'm looking forward to it. The ending is so haunting.
As well as the interpretive portion?
Yes.
This one might have to stretch a little long.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I'm looking forward to talking about it and wrapping it up.
Yeah, so am I. And Jeff, I believe you have the gustatory parting shot.
I do. I think you dug this one up, and
I did.
And I'm going to read it.
Do you like it?
It bothers me.
It's really disturbing,
It is
isn't
disturbing, right? This is one from Gustavo Arellano, who writes, "Eating a burrito is like eating a living, breathing organism. You can feel the burrito's ingredients sigh inside with each bite, each squeeze."
It's terrible, but there's something accurate about it.
Yes, there's a truth there, but it's a truth I do not want to
It's
stare
really
into.
disturbing. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.